Hi, this is Steve Piscitelli with a quick note before we start this podcast. You will hear Dr. John Wall and myself have a wide-ranging conversation about transformational leadership. I have split the podcast into two parts for your listening convenience. Each part runs about 18 minutes. The first part, you will hear our conversation about the characteristics of a transformational leader, the importance of building authenticity, and the importance and the role of vulnerability for the leader. The importance of the leader staying in touch with himself and herself as a person. What are the red flags when it comes to effective leadership? We also looked at understanding the why behind the what of leadership. And we finished off with a question. You'll hear me ask a question about what do you do when you're on the bus, supposedly with all the team members, and you're starting to question the bus driver. What's the best approach to that? You'll hear me ask that question, and then John will pick up with his answer in part two. Once again, thanks for joining us. Here we are at the beginning of part one. Welcome to GRN, the Growth and Resilience Network, where every episode brings you targeted stories and strategies for your professional and personal growth and resilience. I'm Steve Piscitelli, your host, coming from my headquarters, my world headquarters in Atlantic Beach, Florida. Leadership. You know, I did a Google search a few days ago with the word leadership, and I came up with 477 million hits. So I decided to narrow the search to leadership books. Well, that really narrowed it down to 388 million. Wow. You know, there's obviously not a lack of writing and pontificating about leadership, but what is it? And can anyone be a leader? Is it an inborn talent, an acquired skill? Is it both? For a moment, think of the great leaders you have had the opportunity to work with in your life. What did they do, and what did they not do? And think of those who were not leaders, in fact, were probably little more than managers. What did they do, and what did they not do? And when you do that, I believe you start to bring into focus your definition of a leader. And for me, a real leader, a transformational leader, does 5 things. Now, he or she knows how to, 1, build meaningful and authentic relationships. That's critical. 2, tied right into the relationship building, is they know how to validate their followers. They empower their people, not with meaningless comments and compliments, but with real connections. Number 3, they trust their followers. They give them room to develop and explore. The leader sets high expectations, and she also provides space and resources so that the follower can reach those goals while at the same time developing as an individual. Number 4, these transformational leaders say yes to challenges, to risks, to adversity. For them, failure is an option. They actually will help their timid followers move more toward the reckless side of the continuum, and those who might be tight and reticent to loosen up. They prepare the followers to take risks. And number 5, these transformational leaders know how to take action. They don't just sit around with a clipboard checking off boxes, and they encourage their followers to take action. So today, to help us focus on this topic, we have a true transformational leader here at the studio. I know because I had the opportunity to work with him for a number of years. Now, Dr. John Wall knows how to create empowerment zones for his followers. Just a little bit about him. He has been a classroom teacher for more than 2 decades. For the past 6 years, he served in leadership roles in higher education, still in that area, higher ed leadership. He's part of what I consider to be the new wave of young leaders. And when I say young, I don't necessarily mean just in chronological years, but in thought process. He's also, by training, a social psychologist, which I'm sure has helped him a bit as a leader. And recently, or not recently, but in his leadership tenure, he took part in a professional development activity. It was actually a year-long program aimed at growing the skills in transformational leadership. So what better person to have with us today than Dr. John Wall. So, John, welcome to the Growth and Resilience Network.
Hi there, Steve. It's great to see you. It's great to be here. I appreciate the invitation.
All right, we got a lot to cover, and we'll see what we can for our listeners today. How about we start with a simple one? Well, I don't know if it's simple. You tell me. You tell us. What's your definition of a leader?
You know, when you look at that, there's a lot I can say coming out of my field in terms of my formal training in social psychology, and there's a classic definition. You know, a leader is somebody who can influence other people to work towards some sort of goal, and that's all true. But in thinking about this and reading about this over time, not too long ago, probably in the last couple of years, I came across a definition that for me, when I read it, it really resonated, and it was the idea that a leader is anybody who makes a personal commitment to bring out the best or the potential in people and processes. And when I saw that, I thought, you know what, that's really, you know, in any context, when I've thought about leadership, that's really what it's about, is you look at something that you're trying to accomplish, you look at the people you're working with and what their goals are, and then how do you get that to the very best point?
You empower them.
Absolutely.
And I listed 5 characteristics, traits, skills, whatever you want to label them as. So you're starting with a couple right there. You're an influencer as a leader. You're an empowering personality. What else would you say are characteristics when you look at a leader and say, wow,
yeah,
they got this? Yeah,
authentic relationships, no question. That, for me, is the first thing that is most foundational. And that's something that me as a leader, you try on and you learn, because you think about leadership in terms of accomplishing things when you start to get leadership roles, and yet value relationships so much, and you think, is this right that I should be so focused on relationships if leadership is about accomplishing things? But, you know, through my own experience, and then, of course, there's so much to back that up, authentic relationships for me are absolutely number one.
How do you develop that?
There's a real need, I think, on the part of leadership to work towards trust, and that means bringing a certain degree of vulnerability to the work that you do. It means a certain degree of transparency in the things that you do, because when we talk about relationships, it's just not that idea of, you know, contact and knowing what people are doing and what they're up to. It's really talking about caring about people and asking them to care about you and then the enterprise that you're pursuing.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I'm hearing the first 2 points I had made, which was relationships, well, actually 3, validation and trust. And then you mentioned vulnerability. And I remember a great book by Brené Brown. I think it's Daring Greatly or Greatly Daring.
Yep, I know
One
that.
of those. And she talks so much about this idea that vulnerability is so important for growth. But for leaders, when you're supposed to show that you have everything together, vulnerability, that's an interesting characteristic. Is that something that you create? Is that something that you have to sit down at night and say, hey, listen, I can't be plastic. I have to show that, yeah, I can make a mistake, and I'm willing to do that. Can you create that, or is that something that if you don't have it, you just don't have it?
Sure. I think that, you know, Brené Brown's work, she's done a really good job, if people aren't familiar with her work, in making people aware of kind of that aspect of leadership. And when people hear that word, vulnerability, it has maybe that connotation of weakness that you don't think about with leadership. And I might frame it even a little more broadly and say, really what I'm after is that notion of authenticity. And so I would say in any kind of leadership position, I mean, I show up and I understand what needs to be done in terms of leadership, but I show up with all of my personal foibles as well. You know, the little mistakes I make, the quirks that I have, etc. And I think that people relate to it if you show up as a leader and you don't try to hide those things and you don't try to slip into a leadership role, you know, as though you're going on stage and you need to project the notion of a leadership. But you show up as who you are. It's that idea of authenticity. And that may include making some mistakes. It may include things that are just, you know, unique to you, and letting people see that and work with you in that sort of sense. That's something that everybody has. You know, we all show up with a point of view, with a perspective, with habits. It's just the willingness to bring that to your leadership position. People are at different levels along the spectrum in terms of their willingness to do that. I do think that's something that they can learn, though.
It was interesting. You said you show up as a leader, and as you were talking, what I was hearing was you're also showing up as a person. And to me, that's the great leaders I worked with. They were people. They were not just a title. The title gave them some obviously organizational power, but the person that each of those great leaders were, that gave them authority.
I'll tell you a story about this, and I agree with what you're saying. I was working at a place as a faculty member and then moved over to the administrative side, so a more formal leadership role. And within my first week of being there, I'm heading into a building that I've been many times before, and I'm walking into the building. There's somebody who's working there who knows me, has known me for quite a while, and they step out and they open the door for me. Now, for years and years, we would meet each other at the door, and whoever got there held the door. And this person was clearly making an effort to open the door for me, and it really struck me that when you assume that role, all of a sudden, for some people, there's that sense of deference. They begin to treat you differently, etc. And it was very unsettling for me because, to me, I'm the same guy. I'm showing up with the same perspectives. I just have a different job to do. And
different title.
Different title. It's a different title. It's a different role in terms of what you're fulfilling. But you're still the same person, and you want people to relate to you that way. I think one of the things that people have to be careful of course, if you get into a leadership role, is falling into or embracing some of the trappings that come with leadership. Because very easily, if people show you that kind of deference or people are in that role, you might get unglued from who it is you truly are. And I think staying in touch with that and bringing your, if I can say, personhood to your leadership, I think that is absolutely essential for being a transformational leader.
Yeah. And, you know, you've gone through a lot of what I consider and you consider to be the positive signs of a leader. And you've aspired leaders along the way, too. Inspired, and you've worked with aspiring leaders. Is there a red flag when you start to work with a new leader and you look, or even a veteran leader who comes into an organization and you now have to work with? Are there red flags that jump out and you say, whoops, we might have an issue here?
I'll say, you know, one of the things goes back to what I just mentioned, people who seem to maybe embrace or be primarily interested in or lead with an interest in the trappings that come along with leadership, the authority pieces, the special perks, if you will, that are there. Some people might be interested in leadership because of the, and I'll use my air quotes, the power that comes with it. And those things are all, they're certainly all part of leadership, but if a person is leading with that, that's a red flag to me. I had a really interesting conversation as part of that development program that you mentioned earlier in my intro. So somebody who is certainly further along the road of leadership in a higher position and said, you know, when you're an organizational leader, said, you have to be careful that you don't walk around always telling people you have the keys to the kingdom. He said, and you don't got to take the keys to the kingdom out and jingle them in front of people. He said, what you want to do is you want to be effective and you want to work with people in a way that they come to understand how you are applying the keys to the kingdom. In other words, you're working, and if you have authority and you have influence, you use that authority and an influence in a way that people can see it, but you don't lead with those keys, showing them to people, telling people about them.
Interesting. Why did you choose leadership? I mean, I know you were successful. I saw you as a faculty member. You were wonderful in the classroom. You had a great following. You could have been there for 30 years, 40 years. Why did you choose leadership?
I got there kind of by accident. I was teaching, loved teaching, still teach and still love it. Within the institution that I'm at, there was a position where they had what they called an internship, essentially, where you could go and work in an administrative capacity, assisting with some administrative projects, moving those forward, but still maintain your faculty status. And I really looked at that opportunity when I was asked as a one-year sabbatical. And I thought, listen, I'm doing this teaching. I've got a lot of heavy loads. This would be a nice way to maybe have some influence and stretch and, frankly, take a little bit of a breather from teaching for a year so that I could stay fresh and get right back into the classroom. In the course of that year, I really got a buzz out of some of the work that I was doing. And that buzz had to do with being able to connect the dots among people who were working. So, again, through knowledge and relationships that I had with people who were at the college, knowing that people were interested in similar things and be able to put them together and connect the dots, or being given an objective to accomplish and saying, gosh, who are the people that I might collaborate with to get this objective to come to fruition? I got a real buzz out of that, and that's what got me a little more interested into pursuing a more formal leadership kind of thing. I'll add to that just a little bit by background. When I was growing up as a kid, I got in trouble one time. My parents were called in to see the teacher, and I was described, just a little bit of the in-class class clowning, a little bit of that kind of misbehavior, and part of that discussion had to do with being a leader, and what the instructor said is, his peers are following him. This is what she said to my parents, and I didn't see myself as any kind of leader. There's no organizational structure here. I'm just being a kid in class.
Do you remember how old you were?
I was probably I think I'm in 6th grade, so I was probably around 12 years old.
You're leading.
And leading, and that it's interesting, you look back on that kind of thing and that capacity to make relationships and do when people can see you work in that way. So, I think I'm fortunate to have an interest in doing that kind of thing now, hopefully using those skills for better.
Yeah, I recently heard an interview with a leader in the financial world, and he was saying very similar things as you were just saying, that there was an inclination early on in his life that he was not going to be, in his words, the shrinking violet and sit off to the side. He was an organizer. He was up there. He was doing things, and that's what I was hearing, whether it's a class clown or what, and the people are following you. Interesting. Leaders, you can look good and feel good when everything's going well. When things aren't going well, that's when it becomes difficult. How do you manage that?
I think I've reflected on that a little bit, and I've come to the conclusion it's a little bit of a mix of confidence and humility. And the confidence side is when you're in rough waters, believing in yourself and trusting yourself to keep on moving forward. Somewhere along the line in working in leadership, I realized that I can trust myself. And it's a funny realization because I didn't even know that was an issue until I started to get stuck in some places, or I started to be in difficult leadership situations and think, how is this going to work out? And stepping back and taking a breath and saying, you know what, John, you've had to make decisions along the way. You've tended to be right more than you've tended to be wrong. So trust yourself and then and keep on moving forward. And on the humility side, I think that it's important to let people know when you don't have all the answers, to let people know that you understand that things are not going right. One of the things that can frustrate me as a leader is the emperor has new clothes syndrome, where if you're a frontline person or you're doing some work and you see that there are real issues out there, and yet upstream from you, people continue to tell you how wonderful things are, that kind of disconnection has never sat well with me. I've made a commitment then to try to recognize when things are not going well and communicate that I understand that to people. There's a risk maybe that followers or other leaders, your peers, may smell blood in the water and it reflects poorly on you. But
vulnerability again.
That's a great point. It's right back to that idea of vulnerability. But again, I think that kind of humility mixed with confidence gives you kind of a way to work through that. And it does really engage, again, those relationships that I think are so critical to be effective in the long term.
Well, and something I thought of a metaphor that it's kind of cliched metaphor now about, when you're a leader, you get the right people on the bus so that you're going down the road and going in the right direction. And you started addressing that, but what happens when you look at the bus driver and you say, hey, you know what? I'm not sure the bus is going in the right direction. And is there a way to challenge, if that's the right word, to talk to bring it up to the leader above you to say, hey, I have some questions, some doubts, some concerns?